They came in at 0340 station time, which I have always thought was fitting. The dead hours. The hours when attention frays, and discipline is the only thing keeping eyes open. The Vel'Keth Sovereignty had built their whole civilization on the assumption that lesser peoples let their guard down. That patience was a resource only the powerful could afford. They were wrong about that. They were wrong about nearly everything regarding us. I was at my station when the long-range array lit up. 18 contacts, dropping from transit fold in a tight colonial formation, the kind of grouping you use when you expect no resistance and want to project mass. I recognized the formation from the tactical archives before the system had finished its identification sweep. I had studied it since I was a junior officer. Every officer in the Threshold Watch had. Admiral, my sensor chief, Lieutenant Okafor, did not raise his voice. None of us did, that morning. We had waited a long time for this, and there was nothing to shout about. Transit signatures matched the Vel'Keth colonial drive profile. Confidence, 98.4. Log it, I said. Time and formation, logged. I looked at the main display. 18 ships, larger than our records had suggested. They had not been idle in 40,000 years, any more than we had. But their formation was colonial, not military. They were not expecting a fight. They were expecting, I realized, to arrive at a primitive world, transmit a set of old authority codes, and begin processing whatever resources remained. The codes came 11 minutes later, broadcast on the exact frequency our archives had recorded at their departure. Ancient Vel'Keth colonial administrative language, auto-translated by systems we had spent generations building precisely for this moment. This is Sovereignty Reclamation Vessel Eternal Dominion, operating under Colonial Charter Directive 9, Subclause 14. We are returning to claim Experimental Station Designate, Keth Nara 7. All indigenous populations are to present themselves for registration. Comply within one planetary rotation or corrective measures will be applied. Keth Nara 7. That was what they had called Earth. An experimental station. A project they had walked away from 40 millennia ago because the yield projections were not favorable. They had seeded a world with a labor population, decided the return on investment was insufficient, and departed. They had not looked back. The records we had recovered from their own abandoned relay probes, the ones humanity had found and decoded in the 31st century, confirmed it. A single administrator's note in the departure log, Station Keth Nara 7, suspended indefinitely. Population viability, unlikely. I let the silence hold for a moment after the translation finished rendering on my screen. Then I opened a channel. Sovereignty Reclamation Vessel, Eternal Dominion. I said, this is Rear Admiral Yeva Sorn, Commanding Officer of Vigil Station Kara, Threshold Watch, First Anchor of the Earth Perimeter Defense. I am speaking on behalf of the Terran Accord, 61 member worlds, and the 430 billion people who descend from the population you left behind on Keth Nara 7. I paused. I wanted that number to travel. Your colonial authority codes are 40,000 years out of date. There is no registration process. There are no corrective measures available to you. What there is this conversation, and what happens after it. The response took 4 minutes, the light delay at that distance, plus whatever internal deliberation was happening aboard that lead ship. I used the time to watch the display. The Vel'Keth formation had not changed heading. They were still on a direct approach vector to Earth. 18 ships, confident in their colonial charter, confused by the fact that someone had answered. When the response came, it was from a different voice, a commander, or the equivalent. You are speaking an evolved derivative of the Vel'Keth administrative language. This is unexpected. Please clarify your territorial claim. Colonial Charter Directive 9 supersedes any local governance structure that may have developed in the station's absence. Developed in the station's absence. I have told this story many times since, and people always ask what I felt at that moment. I tell them the truth. Not anger. Anger would have been understandable, but anger is a fire, and fires burn hot and then go cold. What I felt was something steadier than that. Something that 40,000 years of a single standing order had built in every one of us who had ever stood a watch in this station. I felt ready. I am going to transmit a file to your vessel, I said. I ask that you review it before we continue. The file was called the Archive of Vigil. Every commander of the Threshold Watch maintained it. added to it, and passed it to their successor. It was not a weapon. It was not a threat. It was a record. It contained the names of every officer who had ever stood watch at the threshold, going back to the founding of the first orbital monitoring station, 600 years after the Vel'Keth departure. Names from every nation that had ever existed on Earth, and then beyond it, as humanity spread and the watch spread with it. It contained the star charts we had built, tracking Vel'Keth transit routes across 40 millennia, updated with every new data point recovered from their abandoned infrastructure. It contained the exact departure frequency they had broadcast when they left, logged, archived, never discarded, and the entry in our founding charter that mandated we keep that frequency monitored in perpetuity. It contained the children's primer we had issued in the early years of the Watch, when we were still a small organization on a single world, with uncertain resources. We do not know when they will return. We know that they will. We will be here. The file was 480 terabytes. It took 3 minutes and 17 seconds to transmit. I watched the Vel'Keth formation on my display while I waited. At the 6-minute mark, deep into their review, something changed. The formation slowed. Not a course correction, a hesitation. The next transmission was a long time coming. When it arrived, the voice was different again, quieter. How long have you been maintaining this watch? Continuously, I said, since the founding of the first monitoring station, approximately 600 years after your departure. The watch has never been suspended. The frequency has never been taken off active monitoring. The standing order has been renewed by every governing body humanity has produced in the intervening period. Another long silence. You built all of this. I assumed they meant the platform, the perimeter, the 61 World Accord, the fleet I had not yet mentioned but which was, at that moment, sitting very quietly in deployment formation on the dark side of the moon, because you expected us to return. We built all of this, I said, because we remembered who left us, and we decided, a very long time ago, that when you came back, we would not be what you left behind. I let that sit. Then I said the last thing I needed to say. The archive of Vigil contains the names of every generation that kept the record. 40,000 years of people who got up every day and did their work, so that when this moment came, we would be equal to it. I am asking you to take that file home with you. I am asking you to read it, and to understand what you abandoned, and what it became without you. And then, I am asking you to inform whoever sent you that this system is not available for reclamation, registration, or any other purpose under any charter you hold. The Vel'Keth formation sat still for 11 minutes. I watched them. My crew watched them. Nobody spoke. Then, one by one, they turned. 18 ships, reorganizing from a colonial approach formation into a transit fold configuration. Slow and deliberate, the way a person moves when they are being very careful not to make a sudden gesture. They did not transmit again. They did not ask for acknowledgement. They simply turned, and they left, and the fold signatures closed behind them one by one, until the long-range array showed nothing but the ordinary dark. Okafor logged the departure time without being asked. That was good practice. That was what the watch did. I sat with my hands on the console for a moment after the last signature faded. Around me I could hear the quiet sounds of a station standing down from silent alert. The soft procedural voices, the status confirmations, the ordinary business of people who had just done what they had spent their entire careers preparing to do. Someone would need to file the contact report. Someone would need to notify the Accord. There were protocols, and the protocols would be followed, because that was how it had always worked. But for that one moment, before any of it began, I thought about the first officer who had ever sat at a monitoring station and logged the Vel'Keth departure frequency into a file marked, "Do not delete." I thought about every name in the archive, every generation that had kept the watch through centuries, when it must have seemed like an old story, a bureaucratic inheritance, a standing order that would never be tested. It had been tested. We had been ready. That, in the end, was all there was to say.